Hey, I'm Kat, mom of 3 and founder of Ritual, the company setting a new standard in the supplement industry. When I was pregnant with my first daughter, I remember staring at my prenatal vitamins and thinking, what's in this stuff? All I found were vitamins high in heavy metals, synthetic colorants, and lacking in the very essential nutrients we need. I believe women deserve to know what they are putting in their bodies and why. So at 4 months pregnant, I quit my job to reinvent the prenatal vitamin. We scoured the world for the best quality ingredients, backed by clinical studies and third-party tested for heavy metals and microbes. And this year, we were awarded the Purity Award from the Clean Label Project, the supplement safety certification that tests for 200 harmful chemicals and toxins. With Ritual, you'll know where your ingredients come from and why we use them. Join our family of skeptics with 40% off your first month when you visit ritual.com/podcast.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Welcome to the Wellness Transcription Podcast, the podcast that combines the power of Christian values with evidence-based nutrition, fitness, and lifestyle content. I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Gurley. Join me each week as we explore the intersections of Christianity and wellness, offering you insights to help nourish your body, mind, and soul. Whether you're looking to improve your physical health or simply strengthen your personal relationship with Jesus, we've got you covered. Stay tuned for inspiring discussions, expert guest interviews, and practical tips to help you live the life God calls us to live. Welcome back to another episode of the Wellness Transcription Podcast. This is, I think, the 4th time I've tried to record this episode on how to navigate nutrition content on social media. The last 2 files I've actually tried to upload on this topic have gotten corrupted. I'm still trying to hammer out all the kinks here on the show, but we're figuring it out, especially as we get into like the videos and editing and reels and stuff like that. So hopefully this all goes smoothly moving forward. I appreciate you guys being here with me today. I think we've got a really good episode to kind of get started on the new year on how to navigate all the nutrition stuff that's on Instagram and Facebook, stuff like that. And I want to give you guys the tools today to really sift fact from fiction and use some of these red flags and tactics that I look out for that help me determine if the information that I'm listening to, whether I understand the material or not, is something worth listening to. Is it evidence-based? Is there bias to deal with here? Or is it simply just not true at all? After we go through each of those tips, we're going to go over some buzzwords, some common buzzwords you may hear in the wellness space that may or may not actually mean what you think they mean, or they're just not a lot of validity to using that word in the context that they're usually used. And then lastly, I'm going to give you guys some tips that I use personally as like a litmus test for people who I should follow in the end to determine if the information is good quality. Before we get into all of them, I'm also going to give you guys a brief background on me. I haven't really done this, but I'm not going to do like my whole life story or anything like that. Just a simple kind of establishing credentials type moment here. So I graduated pharmacy school in 2021. While I was in pharmacy school, it became pretty apparent that I was interested in nutrition. As being a former athlete in college, it was something that was very important for how I performed on the field. And then I felt this kind of eagerness to learn more about nutrition as I was in pharmacy school. I didn't want to be one of those pharmacists who just knew about pharmacy and who wasn't really well-rounded in supplements or nutrition information, stuff like that. And I wanted to be able to provide my patients with resources and information that was evidence-based and that would allow me to be able to do that. So I decided to get a master's degree along with my PharmD so I could better use that information and knowledge in practice, which I do today. I currently work in an independent pharmacy that kind of does a little bit of everything. We do compounding, long-term care management, regular retail stuff, and then we also do a lot of nutrition and wellness consults as well. And then because of the wellness consults and the nutrition stuff, I get to do what I enjoy doing every single day, which is educating patients, helping them answer their questions, helping sift fact from fiction, from what they have heard or may have heard on social media or, in the news, that kind of thing around nutrition. So I'm blessed to be able to do that in a manner that makes it easy for myself and my patients. But my goal here with the podcast is really to just be as evidence-based as we can. We're going to meet in the middle. I'm going to help educate you guys as best I can. And I'm going to stay in my lane. So if it has nothing to do with pharmacy, supplements, or nutrition, I'm probably not going to talk about it other than faith, which is a big part of my podcast. If you listen to the intro or any other episodes, Christianity is a big part of my life. And it's the foundation that I build kind of everything off of. So that we're going to do a lot of episodes on that and kind of trying to tie the two together. So that'll be interesting. It'll be kind of an interesting concept to kind of tie together as those two kind of issues go not necessarily hand in hand all the time. So we're going to continue to do the best we can. This is a learning process for me, and hope you guys get something out of it. So let's dive into today's episode, and we'll hopefully keep this one under an hour. So I'm going to try not to ramble too much. So, okay. So the episode title for today is how to basically separate fact from fiction as far as nutrition information on social media goes. So the first bit of the episode, we're going to dive into some nutrition tactics on social media that should make you skeptical. A lot of other practitioners or certified coaches will use some of these tactics. And a lot of times what this tactic is really trying to do is essentially pigeonhole you into following them and getting them established with either working with them, buying a supplement they may benefit from, that kind of thing. But these tactics I've personally seen happen time and time again on social media, and I want to explain them in a way to make it easier so you can then use them to kind of use as a litmus test to determine if these people are worth following or if they're giving good evidence-based information. Okay, so number one is kind of a double-edged sword. So I call it be aware of the I know everything expert. There's a handful of these. I'm not going to name the ones that come to mind, simply because that's not my goal, is to bash these people. I don't know them on a personal level, so I don't feel like I can call them out directly. That may change, but a lot of these guys claim to have the answer to everything, to know the secret that all your physicians or healthcare providers, they've gone through years of academic training and schooling to help you understand and to help people heal. They'll seem to always have the answer. It's usually cutting edge ish type language. And then the claims they make are very broad and all encompassing. People tend to do this, the I know everything expert or I know all expert. They'll tend to make black and white health claims, like pretty broad black and white health claims. They'll tend to simplify disease states down. And then they'll use very highly emotional and non-specific language and usually tie that in a very dumbed down mechanism that they then extrapolate out to allow or to sound like they're smart and that they have the inside knowledge on something. So in order to better explain this, I would say, let's use an example. So a lot of times in the low carb community, especially ones that are in the keto space or even the carnivore space, they'll all talk about how if you eat carbohydrates, at any type of carbohydrate, they'll say they're fattening because carbohydrates increase insulin levels. And when insulin levels are elevated, fat burning, as most people refer to it as, is inhibited. And because of that, they'll then take that mechanism and say, if you eat carbs consistently in your diet, insulin's always going to be elevated. And then you're only going to be able to store fat and not burn it. So that's essentially the mechanism that they've dumbed down. When in reality, glucose metabolism, de novo lipogenesis, as well as fat oxidation really is fast and complex. It's multifactorial. It's going on all the time. And the relative rates of each of these processes will determine if there is weight gain or weight loss. And a lot of that is really tied into energy balance more than anything, or more than just a specific carbohydrate food itself. I plan on doing a deeper dive into the carbohydrate model insulin model of obesity and debunking that in depth. Hopefully we'll do that one soon. But again, they'll use this very emotional language. They'll sound like they know what they're talking about. And then they'll basically take this mechanism that has some nuggets of truth, but there's a lot more context and nuance involved, and it's way more complicated than it is, or that they're making it out to be. And then they'll just basically say, Yeah, see, your doctors just want you to eat a lot of carbs. The typical standard American diet is high in carbohydrates. We have an obesity crisis that is increasing, so ergo, carbs are the problem. So as you can see, this one's kind of a harder tactic to kind of nail down. But when you really dive into the research and look at these mechanisms, you'll understand just how complicated they are. Again, dumbing it down to a very simplistic mechanism that they then extrapolate out to make these broad health claims of curing all disease with diet is kind of crazy. So that's the first one to look out for. And it's also the hardest one to distinguish. The rest of these are pretty easy as far as I'm concerned to pick apart. So the second one is they'll refer to a single group of foods, a macronutrient, or even a specific food ingredient as toxic or inflammatory. Now, they won't provide any evidence or context as to what toxic or inflammatory means. Are we talking about acute toxicity? Are we talking about acute inflammation? Are we talking about chronic inflammation? Very rarely is any context used. It's just they'll just label a food as toxic or inflammatory with no evidence at all or context as to what they mean by that. And all this is a scare tactic to scare you from buying a certain food or following them to then buy their supplements that help with inflammation and toxicity. So usually they're coupled with detoxes or supplements that are completely unnecessary. And oftentimes it's really just a tactic to scare people. So be wary or skeptical when people just start labeling different foods or ingredients and then just tagging everything with toxic, inflammatory, this and that. Just be aware of that. That's a big red flag. And unfortunately, a lot of people with large followings on the social media platform use these languages, use these terms interchangeably, and I don't think they really know what it means. It's important to distinguish really the differences between acute and chronic inflammation. Acute inflammation is usually localized. There's a local inflammatory response. There can be pain associated with it, but in reality, it's localized to a certain tissue. And as long as it's not overboard or causing other problems, it's a necessary process that your body needs to heal from injury or deal with some sort of issue at a local tissue site. Now, chronic inflammation is a different story. These are systemic blood markers of inflammation that are elevated chronically over long periods of time. And then those are usually associated with autoimmune conditions and other disease states that oftentimes require more medication management or proper nutrition management to really kind of tackle, as well as caloric restriction to kind of deal with. So it's very important to provide context and nuance when you use these terms. Toxic is crazy because anything can be toxic at the high enough dose. The dose makes the poison, so to speak. And even if we're dealing with toxins or poisons, I've even had a poison control expert on here. I'm on a previous episode that we dove into this topic a little bit. And it's just really interesting how often people throw these terms around. And then it also, lastly, on this point, makes it to where there's unnecessary fear around things that aren't toxic or inflammatory, but it also can kind of take the focus off of products that are more likely to have issues with toxicity, especially when you're talking about medications or supplements that may not be regulated as much, or the dose is kind of more narrow as far as therapeutic window goes. All right, so that's number 2. The first 2 are a little bit trickier, but number 3, these got a lot of these practitioners and pages that kind of do the first 2 topics pretty well, the first 2 red flags well. They'll also use these phrases like, we need to hack or reset your metabolism or buy my metabolic reset program because your metabolism's broken if you feel sluggish or you gained weight recently. And it's really just a tactic to scare you to think that their program is very unique or individualized. And a lot of times it's just a marketing tactic. You can't hack or reset a metabolism. If your metabolism was truly broken, you would be dead. That's how that works. Metabolism is extensively complex. There's thousands of enzymatic processes and all these metabolically active tissues that are constantly going on. And to suggest that you could hack, reset, whether your metabolism is broken, it's just crazy. And the fact that you're just going to try to sell people the answer to a problem that they don't have is a big red flag. So that's red flag number 3. Red flag number 4, they're not going to provide proper evidence or citations when they make health claims. This is extremely important. The larger or the more broad or expansive the health claim, the more burden of proof is needed to back up said claim. So you really have to have your evidence in check and make sure it's good quality in the right patient populations anytime you make a health claim. And I tend to hold myself to this standard. I know a lot of other healthcare practitioners do this, but if I make a health claim, I'm going to back it up by citations. If I don't, then if someone asks for those citations, I have to have them ready to go and be able to explain how those citations are relevant to the claim that I made. Unfortunately, a lot of these accounts, if you press them to use evidence or ask them for their sources of information because you may be curious, or you may know that they're actually not being accurate with their information, a lot of times they'll say, oh, well, the research is out there, just Google it. Sometimes they may cite a study if they can find one, or if they're really trying to cherry pick a study to fit their bias, they'll usually cite a cell culture study or an animal study looking at a specific compound or ingredient and showing how it's dangerous. When in reality, when you look at human randomized control trials, meta-analyses, systematic reviews, where you look at large populations over large periods of time that are randomized and controlled for other variables, you just don't see these negative outcomes with these ingredients or food groups, so to speak. So just be really skeptical when people consistently refuse to provide evidence or citations when they make health claims. And unfortunately, Instagram and TikTok are rife with
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
health claims. They'll make them all the time, and they'll just very rarely do I see quality evidence cited. So that's point number 4, red flag number 4. Red flag number 5, they'll also say that calories don't matter, or they'll tell you to count chemicals instead of calories, or if you can't pronounce that ingredient, you shouldn't eat it. And we don't really need to worry about calories because calories are important. Whether people realize it or not, calories in, calories out, and energy balance is the main driver for weight loss, regardless of what type of diet you follow. The science is pretty set on that. There's tons of evidence to suggest that's the case. However, a lot of these fringe diet culture or fringe dieters, like in these low carb or high carb or vegan communities or carnivore communities, a lot of them tend to ignore the fact that calories matter regardless of the diet that you're doing. And if you're losing weight on a diet, ultimately you're eating less calories than your body is expending. And determining what, just because you follow a carnivore diet and you're in a caloric deficit doesn't mean the calories don't matter. It simply means that specific diet you're following is allowing you, whether you realize it or not, to maintain an energy deficit over time. And when you do that, you will lose weight, and that's pretty standard. But it's kind of shocking to me how many scientists or health experts, physicians, even other pharmacists or nutritionists will say that calories really don't matter. We've kind of gone past that. Science has expanded, and it's these more fringe mechanisms, and carbohydrates are bad, those types of things. When in reality, calories aren't sexy. There's nothing really inherently interesting about them. It's important, and it's complicated to truly track your calories, and we can't be perfect with it, but we can get pretty close. But it's a lot of work, and a lot of times people are looking for that. They're looking for something that's maybe easier to do. I don't have to worry about it. It's kind of a shortcut, or they're trying to get a certain goal met quicker. Calorie counting can be daunting to a lot of people, especially people with eating disorders. So someone who's anorexic, who used to count calories and freak out over even small, minuscule numbers that aren't a problem, I would never recommend them counting calories to lose weight because they could easily spiral out of control. So basically, the whole point I'm making is that calories do matter. You don't have to count them, but if you choose to count them, or if you have success with counting them, they are important, and they are the ultimate driver of weight loss or weight gain, regardless of what diet you tend to follow or stick with. So that's red flag number 5. They simply will say calories don't matter, and they just will refuse to accept that as fact. Number 6, the 6th red flag, is my favorite personally. I would say this one and number 8 are my favorite that we'll get to, but they'll appeal to conspiracy rather regularly. Now, what does this mean? When someone appeals to conspiracy, they typically will use language like something like this. They'll say, this is the one weight loss secret that the big food industry doesn't want you to know about. Or this one's all too common as well. This is the one supplement that big pharma doesn't want you to know about. That's the secret to achieving weight loss in the body of your dreams. Basically, any type of, I have the secret to corrupt evil corporation doing a vague thing, all it really is a tactic to kind of draw you in and get your money. Usually a lot of that language is coupled with selling some sort of supplement a program that is not inherently unique, but it's simply just, they're playing to people's opinions of these industries that, don't get me wrong, a big pharma, big agriculture, big government industries, especially in the medication space, as well as the nutrition or supplement space. And these regulatory agencies have done a lot of corrupt things over time, and we have to call them out when they do that. But at the same time, they've also done a lot of things that have been beneficial to a large amount of people. So it's not always this big boogeyman, big pharma thing. That's not the main driver. There's not always this like Wizard of Oz figure behind the curtain, really trying to determine who stays fat and who isn't. As interesting as that sounds, and I do enjoy a good conspiracy theory every now and then, but when it comes to nutrition, a lot of times all this conspiracy language that people use, it's just simply a marketing tactic, and there's really no weight behind any of the claims that are made. And again, they're just trying to get your money. And most of the time, I'm confident by saying that there's usually some string attached or supplement to buy that kind of allows you to be unique and against these big forces, big shadowy figures. So that's red flag number 6. Red flag number 7, I do see this one a lot, specifically on a podcast that I recently listened to. That was the checkup with Dr. Mike. He had on a pretty popular wellness influencer and former cardiothoracic surgeon, Dr. Stephen Gundry. And in the podcast, which was ultimately fascinating because you have 2 evidence-based practitioners that work with patients every day, basically having a very civil debate and disagreement with a person who relies heavily on anecdotal evidence. They kind of fall into that I know all category that we talked about earlier. But there was one interesting claim made on that podcast where basically Dr. Gundry says that he can claim any disease with his nutrition protocol. And if you just work with him, he can basically reverse all disease. And they were taken aback by that claim because it's ridiculous. And essentially, he stood his ground. He was pretty confident that he could reverse all disease and that his program had all the answers. And it, just like anything, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. And you just can't make claims like that, especially a healthcare professional who knows better, who knows just how complicated the human body is, especially around nutrition and medication management and even surgery. The body is a complex machine that is very resilient, and to suggest that you can simply claim that any disease you can cure with your nutrition protocol is just crazy. Any practitioner worth their salt should never make claims like that. It's just not how science works. And you have to be really skeptical of people in that nutrition charlatan kind of space that make these claims that they can cure any disease with nutrition alone. Don't get me wrong. I want to provide some context here. Proper nutrition can be extremely beneficial for you. It can reduce your risk for all-cause mortality, chronic diseases like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, dyslipidemia. I mean, proper nutrition is a huge lever to pull in terms of living longer, living free of disease, and just living a better, healthier lifestyle. But we have to be very careful to suggest that it's all nutrition alone. There's so many other benefits and things that you can get from medication management properly. Medications, just like nutrition isn't the 100% the answer, medications aren't 100% the answer. I think our healthcare system is pretty apparent with that medications alone really don't cure things. They don't tend to, they tend to kind of manage symptoms. But when someone who's extremely sick or in a situation where they need to get these problems under control quickly, medications are extremely important. I don't think anyone's really making the argument that medications aren't useful, but also even people like myself who went to 4 years of doctoral training in medicine specifically to be able to help patients and make sure that everything is dosed appropriately and is safe. It's very, very few. I've never really met anyone in my space that says that medications are the only answer. You don't have to do anything else. So again, anytime you see that you can cure all disease with nutrition alone, or even with medications alone, or whatever have you, just be skeptical. That's red flag number 7. Got 3 more of these, and then we'll get into some buzzwords to look out for, and then we'll end it on some tips that I have for you guys. So the next one is my second personal favorite, and that's when people make videos in the grocery store, and they'll create fear around misinterpreting nutrition labels or specific ingredients on said label. This has become an all too familiar practice, and unfortunately, people that do this kind of content are very successful at scaring the people that choose to watch it. It allows people, whether they realize it or not, to establish some pretty disordered eating habits. You're increasing your likelihood for developing an eating disorder called orthorexia nervosa, or the fear of eating anything unhealthy or anything that you've deemed as unhealthy. I'm not suggesting that you should eat unhealthy things, but when you start telling everyone in the store and you're running around the aisles recording yourself saying that all these foods are going to kill you and give you cancer and that they're toxic or inflammatory and that no one should ever buy these for their children, blah, 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 or let alone eat them. And you even extrapolate that out to where people are talking about vegetables and fruits and other healthy food items, and they're creating unnecessary fear and making these crazy claims that aren't supported by any evidence around these foods and demonizing them. It doesn't help anybody. All it does is allow you to spend one, more time in the grocery store. Who wants to do that? Two, it allows you to freak out over little things that really probably in the big scheme of things don't matter a whole lot. And then it creates more confusion. A lot of times in these videos, you'll see comments time and time again where people are like, okay, if this is bad and that's bad and that's bad, what can we eat? Air? It's like if you took all of the claims and foods that the people that do these types of videos, if you literally stopped eating anything that they said was dangerous, you'd probably be hard pressed to have anything left you can eat. So it's really sad that that's what's getting attention. Now, on the flip side, there are people who make grocery store videos that show you what recipes to do, healthy swaps that you can do. They'll show you how to add or take away, or healthy choices that you could add if you enjoy these types of foods. And they do it in a very educational and safe manner. I think that's great. However, just be skeptical when you see people in the grocery store aisles that are just creating fear around food labels and all that stuff. It's just kind of crazy and it doesn't help anyone. The last point I'll make on this one is I've seen people I've even seen a video where a person went to a random stranger and started critiquing the food items in their grocery cart and told them, and basically was just bad mouthing everything that they bought for their family. And when this person's just going about their own business, trying to feed their family, and you've got this crazy person yelling at them essentially and chastising them over the foods they've decided to eat. It's just not helpful. It's not a helpful practice, and it makes you look like a complete tool. So please, if you're making videos in the grocery store demonizing people and the food choices that they make, just stop. It's not helping anyone. Red flag number 9 is, this is even easier to critique, but a lot of these influencers won't have the proper education, experience, or credentials to give nutrition or health advice. It doesn't mean you have to have all these letters after your name to make solid informational videos that people can use and benefit from, but proper education, experience, and credentials are important whenever you're making nutrition or health claim or giving medical advice. So just be skeptical of terms. And not all credentials are equal. I would say you can have a lot of physicians or nurses that want to chime in on nutrition. I think that's great if they want to provide useful information, but we have to be really careful with the kind of agenda we're pushing or how we give that information to patients, because they're going to see you as an authority figure. So you have to do the due diligence to them by providing sound information that's backed up by science. That's easy for people to understand. A lot of these influencers will use terms like biohacker or human biologist, and these labels oftentimes give you the illusion that they have this credentialing that sets them apart and makes them unique. But in reality, those titles usually don't hold a lot of weight when it comes to clinical relevance in a specific area of study. So be skeptical for people who don't have the proper education or credentials, or if they do have the proper education or credentials, be skeptical if they tend to kind of go outside of their scope of practice more often than not. You don't want those people to use their credentials to then deem themselves as an I-know-all expert who always seems to have an answer for every problem that you may face. And myself, as a healthcare provider, really, if it has nothing to do with dietary supplements, herb drug interaction, pharmacy related topics, or dosing, or even other nutrition topics such as disease state management and management of certain disorders and diseases with nutrition, I really don't talk about it. If it's outside of my area of expertise, I can refer you to someone who does know that. Most practitioners should be aware that's something that they can do. It doesn't mean you don't know as much as the other person. It just allows you to establish rapport and admit to your patients that you may not know something, and that's totally fine. And lastly, the type of people that will create unnecessary fear or shame around prescription medications. Now, this is not a defense of big pharma or pharmacy in general, but medications are vastly important for a large variety of patients and different patient populations and disease states. They are a medical miracle that we have as many medications as we do. But when you create unnecessary fear, shame around prescription medications, when you don't have the relevancy to be able to make said claims and you don't have the knowledge of the particular medications you're villainizing, just be skeptical. More often than not, people who make claims about certain medications like this will have zero hesitancy around dietary supplements. They'll use appeal to nature fallacies quite often. They'll say, oh, my supplements are all natural, they're safe, you don't want these prescription medications that have all these side effects. When in reality, depending on the supplement, it may or not be regulated or good quality. So you can also have medical harm that comes across with certain supplements that aren't as regulated as or undergone the necessary clinical scrutiny and testing that medications have undergone. So be skeptical when you see people constantly creating fear around prescription medications or their use, or that they always have the natural alternative to something like that. I mean, I've seen countless videos where people will recommend a natural approach to an infection where antibiotics are warranted. I mean, that's dangerous and it allows people to.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Kind of steer away from actual medical care and a problem can get worse. And then next thing you know, we're in a much worse situation. So that's the 10 red flags. I'm going to briefly re-mention each of these. So number one, they'll make black and white health claims and they'll speak using these highly emotional and non-specific language terms around a specific mechanism. They'll tend to simplify a very complex mechanism. And then they'll tie all that into their kind of, I know everything approach to nutrition or health. So once you figure that one out, it's easier to pick apart, but this is definitely the hardest step to kind of get down. Number two, they'll refer to a single group of foods, a macronutrient, or a specific food ingredient as toxic or inflammatory without providing any evidence or context as to why they're labeling the foods as such. They'll use phrases like how to hack and reset your broken metabolism, something to that nature. They won't provide proper evidence or citations when they make health claims. They'll say calories don't matter. They'll appeal to conspiracy all the time. And they'll claim that any disease can be cured with proper nutrition alone. And they'll make videos in the grocery store demonizing those ingredients. They tend to not have the proper education, experience, or credentials to give nutrition or health advice. And then they'll create unnecessary fear around medical professionals doing their job or prescription medications or the use of prescription medications for disease state management. But they'll have zero hesitancy around the supplements that they may benefit financially from, or they'll appeal to nature a lot. Well, they say, well, we need to always take the natural and alternative approach. So those are the big 10 red flags that I use to kind of sift through the nutrition content that I might be exposed to on my algorithm on Instagram, TikTok, whatever platform you tend to get your information from. Now, the next part of the podcast I want to talk about are some buzzwords that should make you skeptical immediately. I won't dive into these in great detail, but it's just anytime you hear these phrases, just know that there needs to be more context and that you shouldn't just accept these buzzwords as fact. Mainly, they're just used to get your attention. And very often, more often than not, these claims by people that are using these types of buzzwords, there's just no evidence or any type of scientific backing to these claims or these buzzwords that they use all too frequently. So there's 10 of these. The first one is balancing your hormones with food. That's kind of difficult to do. Certain nutrition protocols and caloric restrictions can have positive effects on hormone levels, but we have to be very specific on which hormones are being affected and how. Are we measuring our hormones before and after? How do you know that your hormones are getting balanced by this nutrition protocol that you tend to push? If you're not checking those levels, most of the time, this is just usually applied to a side effect for people that get your attention. They'll oftentimes say, look, are you tired, sluggish, having trouble sleeping, or feeling low energy? If so, your hormones are out of balance. And if you try my particular diet protocol, we can balance your hormones and help you feel better than ever before. It's just a marketing tactic, or more often than not, these claims are simply not substantial. These programs really aren't going to balance your hormones, especially if they don't check for them at all or check them before and after. And just know that balancing your hormones is really just kind of a buzzword more often than not. The second one, I won't go into too much detail here, but they'll usually use words like optimize your neurotransmitters or optimizing dopamine or serotonin with my supplement protocol. Just be skeptical. Again, this kind of goes hand in hand with balancing your hormones. Optimizing dopamine or serotonin really doesn't mean a whole lot. There are certain medications that do that. The mechanisms are very complicated and we still don't quite know them entirely, but just using your language around a supplement to say that it optimizes serotonin better than, say, an SSRI does is kind of silly, simply because no one really in the healthcare space thinks, nor do the guidelines say that any type of mental health condition has anything to do with low serotonin levels. No physician that I'm aware of actually looks at serotonin levels to diagnose a mental health disorder. And that kind of way of thinking really kind of died back in the 40s and 50s before we really knew anything about said conditions. So just be real skeptical when you hear terms like optimize your neurotransmitters, because oftentimes it's tied to supplements that probably don't do what you think they're going to do, and you're just wasting your money. Number 3, the third buzzword is activating autophagy or mitochondrial optimization or mitochondrial uncoupling. A lot of times this is just a very oversimplified, broad way of trying to make your program or supplement unique in regards to a cellular function that occurs in all your cells constantly. Autophagy is more of a cell recycling type thing where old broken down proteins in a certain cell are recycled, or even entire cells are recycled, kind of cleared out, especially as they get to the end of their life cycle. It's a process that is ongoing constantly. It's happening in your body right as we speak. But you really can't do a whole lot as far as supplements and nutrition goes to really have any great effect on autophagy levels. There's actually more evidence supporting the fact that prolonged caloric restriction and weight loss has better effects on autophagy than said fasting does. But a lot of fasting programs or apps or practitioners that are really like fasting will kind of tend to say, oh, it activates autophagy. And really, they're just trying to make themselves stand out amongst the crowd. And I think fasting is great. I've had a lot of clients and people in my life who use fasting as a tool to maintain a caloric deficit to lose weight. And I think that's awesome. But we have to be really skeptical by trying to make these fasting protocols unique by claiming that they have effects on autophagy when the research just isn't there to back that up. Buzzword number 4, chemical-free foods. I'm going to keep this one simple. All foods and all objects are made up of chemicals. So we need to be really skeptical to say that foods are chemical-free, because that's not the case. Chemicals are a part of life. Every food has thousands of them to a degree that we either we know about or we don't know about. So just stay away from people trying to sell you chemical-free protocols or chemical-free supplements. It's kind of silly. The 5th buzzword is going to be adrenal fatigue. I won't get into too much of this one, but adrenal fatigue is oftentimes applied to these very broad symptoms that most people have that may be associated more likely with poor sleep or lack of exercise or physical activity or a underlying medical condition rather than adrenal fatigue. A lot of times adrenal fatigue is used to describe people who are tired, sluggish, feeling a little bit brain fog or stressed, more anxious, when in reality, adrenal fatigue is not a diagnosable condition unless you have a disease that is directly related to the adrenal glands that is very rare. If you do think you might have something like that or have a condition where adrenal issues might be something you need to consider, I highly suggest going to your primary care physician, talking to them, having them run some basic tests, and if warranted, getting a referral to an endocrinologist who has specialized training in adrenal diseases. Again, those are very rare. We're talking about Addison's disease. We're talking about pheochromocytomas, which are benign tumors on the adrenal glands. Cushing's disease, all of these types of adrenal related disorders are very rare and aren't as common as you would think. So just be real skeptical when you hear adrenal fatigue, because adrenal fatigue, there's actually a systematic review debunking the fact that it even exists. I don't think the evidence is there to warrant that as a diagnosable condition currently at the moment. So I tend to not ever suggest that adrenal fatigue is a thing. Now, if the science changes on that topic, I'll have to change my opinion on it. But again, adrenal fatigue, not really a thing as far as I'm concerned. Number 6 is any immune boosting protocol. Oftentimes these are just buzzwords to make your product unique or supplement unique. I don't personally like using the term immune boosting because that really technically implies that we're in the autoimmune conditions category. I tend to prefer to use immune strengthening or immune supporting. That's usually how it's used in the scientific literature on those specific topics. So just be skeptical. Immune boosting doesn't necessarily mean a product is bad or dangerous. It's just not, it's a term that it doesn't really mean what people think it means. Number 7, the leaky gut. I'll go into leaky gut in depth on a podcast by itself, but essentially leaky gut is very similar to adrenal fatigue in that it's used to describe a lot of different issues, and these symptoms are very vague and non-specific. They usually tie hand in hand with food sensitivity testing and unnecessary testing. The only time you see leaky gut, or the more appropriate medical term would be gastrointestinal permeability, would be in inflammatory bowel disorders, where you have lesions and chronic inflammation in the gut and damages to the villi or the nutrient absorbing cells in your intestines. So when you have damage there and then you have a severe condition that causes problems such as colorectal cancers and ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, even severe IBS, where you have a lot of issues there, in maybe some gut dysbiosis conditions such as like C. diff and other infections, you can get and you can see increased intestinal permeability and issues associated with that, simply to imply that a person who eats something and feels bloated the next day has a leaky gut and that's the root cause of all their disease. It's kind of silly. The science isn't there, and it's really just it's not useful to suggest that. The science really isn't there yet, and we're learning. But again, the gut and the gut microbiome, we're just scratching the surface on this area of science. So be skeptical when people tend to be microbiome experts. I actually personally know a few PhDs that do gut microbiome research, and they'll be the first people to tell you that we don't know much of anything yet. And it's fascinating, and it's going to be really cool to see where the science goes on it. But again, if you mention leaky gut to people in this space, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? Because it's not really a thing yet. So I'm currently not convinced that we need to worry about it at the moment, unless we're dealing with an inflammatory bowel disease. So just keep in mind, leaky gut, someone's trying to sell you something or convince you that you have leaky gut, just be skeptical. Number 8, heal your mitochondria. This goes hand in hand with supplements or diet protocols. There's really no evidence that any of these certain protocols or foods or anything that you're doing is really healing your mitochondria. There's not a good test to determine if your mitochondria are being healed or not. So just be skeptical. A lot of times the uniqueness or this mechanism is used just very vaguely to apply to a wide host of issues or supplements that someone may be pushing. So just be skeptical when you hear that. Number 9 are detox, cleanses, or reset protocols. I already told y'all kind of my stance on that. I think they're useless most of the time, and all they do is really, the only thing they're really good for is taking your money. And then number 10 is food sensitivities. Food sensitivities, there's not a whole lot of evidence that those are really a thing yet. Now, the science is not settled on that by any means, but a lot of times food sensitivities and food sensitivity testing is usually measuring what's called an IgG antibody, which is more of a memory antibody more than anything else. Essentially, what IgG levels indicate would be foods that you're routinely exposed to and that you eat as a part of your normal routine and normal diet. If you have higher IgG levels to certain foods, it's essentially just your immune system going, oh, I've seen that food before, it's food, I don't need to worry about it. More often than not, these food sensitivity testing panels are not clinically validated. The labs don't really mean what you think they mean. And then a lot of these foods that you may or may not eat at all will pop and say, oh, you're sensitive to it, you should avoid it. And pretty soon you're doing this overtly restrictive diet and you're eliminating foods that are very beneficial for your health in the long run unnecessarily because someone told you on a test that's not clinically validated or useful in a clinical sense that you're sensitive to it. So just be skeptical. If you're concerned about an intolerance or an allergy, which are entirely different, go see an allergist if you're worried about those types of things, or ask your gastroenterologist or PCP if you can get a referral for some testing in that regard. Briefly, food intolerances are simply you can't break down certain ingredients. And then when you do that, you have trouble digesting it, and there can be abdominal discomfort, bloating, diarrhea associated with those things. Lactose intolerance is a prime example here, where you actually have an intolerance or you can't break down the lactose in dairy products. So if you have that condition, then you need to be aware of that you're dealing with an intolerance. A food allergy is a direct allergy to a food that leads to some form of serious allergic reaction or anaphylactic reaction. But again, you can't really use the term food sensitivities, intolerance, or allergy interchangeably. They are all separate and they do different things. So again, more often than not, people will use these terms interchangeably, whether they realize it or not, simply because they just may not be educated on what they actually mean. So those are 10 buzzwords that should make you skeptical. They kind of go hand in hand with the 10 red flag tactics that you may see on social media. So those are balancing your hormones with food, optimizing neurotransmitters, activating autophagy, a chemical-free diet, adrenal fatigue, immune boosting protocols, leaky gut, healing your mitochondria, detoxing or reset protocols, and then food sensitivities. Those are the 10 things that more often than not should make you at least skeptical or should make you kind of ask for more evidence when claims are made or when those terms are used. So that's all the negative stuff. I personally look for those things when I'm going on social media to determine if the information is useful or not. As a healthcare practitioner, it's easier for me to do this than, say, the layperson who's just trying to figure out what works and how to better optimize their health. But just know it's very complicated. And if you're confused, seek professional help with these endeavors to people who are properly credentialed to give advice. So I didn't want to just give you the red flags and leave you hanging. We're going to finish this episode up. I'm going to give you 10 tactics and 10 things I use as a litmus test to determine who to follow, what content you could put out there if you're so willing to. And this allows you to then determine what content or videos you may or may not want to follow. So these are pretty simple ones. I use these all the time, but we really need to use these more often than not to determine who to follow. So there's so many people in this space that utilize these 10 principles very frequently. And I follow these people that do them. I'll just name a handful off of the top of my head. Dr. Spencer Nadolsky is great at this. Lane Norton, who's a PhD. Dr. Ids is great. There's countless other people that use evidence-based nutrition on a daily basis, and all of them do these very well. Langer Nutrition's another one. The Plant Slant, Rob Lapham, I think is his name. I hope I didn't butcher that one. But they all do a really good job of using evidence and using these 10 principles that I'm about to share with you guys. And I want you guys to hold me to the standard as well. I don't want you to think that I'm this like know-it-all person who's holier than thou. I'm really going to just utilize the principles that any scientist should. So here's the 10 things that I use to determine who to follow. So number one, they'll use proper citations for any health claims that they make. Again, this goes back to evidence, guys. If you're going to make a health claim, you need to cite evidence that's in the proper population, it's evidence-based, and it's preferably done in humans and is controlled. And it goes along with a scientific consensus. So if someone you follow is doing that frequently and their content is reflective of that, please continue to follow them. Number two, they'll use phrases like "it depends." Now, "it depends" isn't a sign that we don't know something. It's simply acknowledging that there's either more context that needs to be provided, or we may not know the answer, and then we'll educate ourselves more on it and we'll get back to you, or we may refer you to someone else who might know. So saying "it depends" isn't necessarily an acceptance of defeat or acknowledgement that we're wrong. It's simply saying that usually more context is needed. And in science, using phrases like "it depends" is crucial, especially for the field to continue to expand as it's doing. Number three, their content doesn't try to scare you or make you feel guilty about your food choices. Again, this is pretty self-explanatory. If I'm constantly scaring you to sell you something, I'm really not helping you a whole lot. A good educator is going to educate, and they're not going to try to make you feel bad about the way you're living your life. They may help you implement more healthy habits, and they're going to do it in a manner that's caring and that they want to see what's best for you. But again, they're not going to try to shame you or scare you. It's just not going to be beneficial. So number four, they'll promote a healthy relationship with food, and they'll maintain that you need a balanced diet overall. And they also won't tell you to remove entire food groups or macronutrients from your diet. Again, it's all patient specific, what you're going to stick to, what's easiest to fit into your lifestyle that also implements healthy habits. And however you choose to do that is great. And whatever coach or person you're following should encourage that and not try to pigeonhole you into a specific way of eating because it worked for them or may have worked for someone else. Each person is unique and should be treated as such. So a good content creator will be doing that. Number 5, they'll educate you about your physiology. They'll use simple terms that you can understand. They won't simply try to talk in fancy terms and use all this fancy language to sound smart. It's simply just trying to educate you to provide stuff that's easy for you to understand that you can then implement into your daily life. So education is key here. Let's see. Number 6, they'll refer to other experts when they feel like a topic is outside of their scope. This goes hand in hand with point number 2 that I made, where they'll use language like it depends. A good practitioner should always acknowledge when they don't know something, stay in their lane, and then refer others when a topic's outside their scope. Number 7, they won't force their lifestyle or dietary patterns on you, and they'll give you guys options. This goes hand in hand with someone who's promoting a balanced diet and a healthy relationship with food. Just because they had success on a low carb diet doesn't mean you will. And it's up to you on what pattern you want to choose. And then it's up to the practitioner to then help you implement healthy habits on top of that. But I'm not going to force my way of eating or lifestyle on you. I think you're an adult. You're able to make your own decisions. So why would I force you to do something? Number 8, their advice is in line with the expert scientific consensus on a specific topic. Again, guys, if you're making a health claim, it needs to be in line with the consensus of what the research is showing. If you're constantly going against the grain or kind of cherry picking studies or finding these fringe studies to support your claim, it's very likely that you're not doing your due diligence, or you have pigeonholed yourself into a line of thinking and you realize, okay, I'm too far into this now. I can't acknowledge that I may have been wrong this entire time. So you just kind of tend to dig your hole deeper. Before you know it, you're just going to be in too big of a hole to dig yourself out of. So never, and I wouldn't say never, but be skeptical when your opinions or the studies you're citing are constantly these fringe ones that really go against these large human clinical and trials and meta-analyses. And if they're constantly going against where the consensus is at, you need to have a better look in the mirror as far as where you stand on a particular topic. Number 9, they won't cherry pick studies to fit their agenda or narrative. That goes hand in hand with the point I just made. I could cherry pick and find a study just to fit just about any type of claim I want to make. But again, it goes back to what does the overall scientific consensus in the literature say? And literature is not easy to understand. It's complicated. It takes a lot of training. And I've gone through it. I know what quality evidence is, and it's up to me and people like myself to be able to sift through that and bring you guys the 411 on it that's coming from a non-biased approach that's in line with what the science is at and what the science is saying. And then number 10, we're not always going to try to sell you something. If I ever try to sell you something, I am involved with a couple of supplement companies, or one in particular, and then some other endeavors down the line, but I'm going to be open and honest with you guys. If I'm actually financially benefiting or incentivizing some of these products, I'll be open and honest with you about that. Again, it's up to you if you want to decide to try them out, but know that I'm never going to not admit that to you guys. I'm not always trying to sell you something. The best education most of the time is free, and that's what this channel is going to be about. Okay, so that's 10 things I think any good count should be doing. I'll reiterate these really quick. So that's including proper citations when health claims are made. They'll use phrases like it depends. Their content doesn't try to scare you or make you feel guilty about your lifestyle or your food choices. They're going to promote a healthy, balanced diet and a good relationship with food. They'll educate you about your physiology or biology using simple terms that you can understand. They'll refer to other experts when they feel like a topic's outside their scope. They won't force their lifestyle or dietary patterns on you, and they're going to give you options. Advice is in line with this expert scientific consensus on a particular research topic or area of expertise. They're not going to cherry pick studies to fit their own agenda, and they're not always trying to sell you something. So those are the 10 things that I think good accounts do well. And if they do that well, I would strongly suggest you continue to follow them and support their content. And lastly, the last 10 tips I'm going to give you guys are just some good practices that creators are going to do and that we should continue to promote. These are also kind of tips that I think are beneficial for anyone who's just trying to get started on a healthy lifestyle. We're in the new year. 2024 just started. A lot of people have New Year's resolutions. So hopefully these 10 tips are going to help you guys ease into your health goals, especially of losing weight or getting in better shape or improving your nutrition or diet overall is a goal that you have for 2024. Here's 10 tips that I think would be beneficial for you guys in making sure your resolutions come true this year. Number one, let's minimize but not entirely eliminate processed foods. Processed foods are unfortunately more often than not highly calorically dense, void of nutrients and fiber most of the time, and are very easy to overconsume. Now, I enjoy processed foods just as much as the next guy. So I'm not saying you have to entirely eliminate them, but if you eat a diet high in processed foods and that's what constitutes most of your diet, let's try to kind of flip that and make it to where you enjoy them and you can work them into a healthy diet. But let's minimize those and prioritize balanced meals with a variety of nutrient-dense food options. And then that makes it even easier to incorporate processed foods that you do enjoy, especially when cravings hit, to where you don't feel like you're having to restrict yourself or that you can never eat something you enjoy again. So that's number one, is let's not minimize but not eliminate processed foods from our diet. Number two, prioritizing balanced meals. Already said this one, and more nutrient dense food options. Number three, eat plenty of protein. Protein is great for satiety and curbing your appetite. If you have a large appetite like myself, eating plenty of protein really helps. So a good rule of thumb is a gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. Lean body mass, there's calculators out there that will help you roughly determine where they're at. If you want to eat more, you can go to 1 gram per pound of body weight. But if you're a male like myself who's physically fit and active, that protein number can be pretty high. So you have to ask yourself if that's realistic or not. Number four, we want to focus on increasing our strength in the gym and focus on building lean muscle. Building lean muscle and attaining that over long periods of time is going to be great for longevity and improved health. And it's one of the biggest levers you can pull for improving and decreasing your risk for all-cause mortality if you have increased strength throughout your life, as well as retaining lean muscle mass into your later ages and later stages of life. It's going to be beneficial. So focusing on that, whether that be spending more time in the gym or exercising and prioritizing strength training that you like and that fits your daily routine, I think it's going to be very beneficial for you. Number five, we're going to prioritize our sleep, 6 to 8 hours of sleep a night. Good sleep hygiene is going to be great. I think that's extremely important. Number six, we're going to live a more active lifestyle. However, whatever that means for you is how I want you to do that. Doesn't mean you have to go kill yourself in the gym or work out for hours. You do hours of constant cardio. Just be more active, get out there, take walks, get on your feet more, be outside as best you can, and then just fit that into your lifestyle. And before you know it, you don't even feel like you're having to force yourself to be more active. It's just a part of what you do. Number seven, we're going to foster positive relationships with people and food. Food is a bonding, as much of a community social gathering type thing. People bond over food and it's a fun thing to do. So having positive relationships with people and food and a healthy relationship with food is going to make that even easier. Guys, number eight, seek advice from healthcare professionals if you're confused or struggling with any aspect of your health. We're out here to help. If a provider doesn't want to give you the time of day or you don't feel like they have your best interests at heart, then, there's plenty of other providers that are out there that do care and do want to see you succeed. So that's important. If you're confused or need any help, please ask for help from qualified professionals. Last two, start with clear and actionable goals for your diet, especially in the new year. Don't make these giant, daunting goals that seem like almost impossible to complete. And before you know it, in a few weeks, you're quitting. Start with small, actionable goals that you can do, and then continue to progress day by day. You'll see tons of progress. And I know you're going to be proud of yourself at the end of it. And then lastly, this is my favorite one, is focus on what you should add instead of what you should cut out. It's not always about eliminating things. Sometimes if you want pizza or burgers or something that you could easily go down the street to a fast food joint and get, let's make them at home and let's add some stuff to get more fiber in. Add veggies when you can, stuff like that. Making food enjoyable is key, and finding a good way to do that in a healthy way is great. So I think those are 10 good tips that you can use in the new year to help you achieve your goals. I'll rattle these off real quick in the episode. So that's minimizing and not eliminating processed foods, prioritizing balanced meals with a variety of nutrient-dense food options, eating plenty of protein, increasing your strength and focusing on building lean muscle, prioritizing sleep, living a more active lifestyle, fostering positive relationships with people and food, seeking advice from healthcare professionals if you're confused or struggling with your health, starting with clear, actionable goals for the new year as far as diet and health goes, and then focusing on what you should add instead of what you should cut out. So I've spent enough time talking. I'm tired of hearing myself ramble. So I hope you guys got something out of that. I hope this makes nutrition navigation on social media easier for you. Know that I'm here to help you guys out. I'm excited that you listen and give my content the time of day. If you like and enjoy the video, YouTube channel's coming soon. Support us on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. Welcome to the Wellness Transcription Podcast, the podcast that combines the power of Christian values with evidence-based nutrition, fitness, and lifestyle content. I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Gurley. Join me each week as we explore the intersections of Christianity and wellness, offering you insights to help nourish your body, mind, and soul. Whether you're looking to improve your physical health or simply strengthen your personal relationship with Jesus, we've got you covered. Stay tuned for inspiring discussions, expert guest interviews, and practical tips to help you live the life God calls us to live.